Melanie. She said my name like we were old friends, like we'd ever had a single conversation that didn't involve her needing something. Oh my God, I have the biggest favor to ask, and you're literally the only person who can help. I looked up from my laptop. IT was 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I had 3 code reviews to finish before 5, a meeting with the development team at 4:30, and a growing headache from the fluorescent lights that flickered every 7 seconds like clockwork. The last thing I needed was Brooke Adams and whatever crisis she'd manufactured this time. But she was already sliding a piece of paper onto my desk, covered in neat handwriting, flight dates, names, 8 people, round trip to Miami, leaving in 3 weeks. The thing is, she said, and her voice got that little girl quality that made me want to either gag or give her whatever she wanted just to make it stop. My credit card is totally maxed out right now. Like, embarrassingly maxed, but I get paid on Monday, and I swear to God, Mel, I will transfer you the second the deposit hits. You won't even have to ask. I should have said no. Every rational part of my brain was screaming no. But here's the thing about being the reliable one in an office. You get used to people needing you. You start to think that's the only reason they keep you around, because you're useful. And somewhere, underneath all the practical, this is a bad idea thoughts, there was that smaller, sadder voice that said, if you say yes, she'll like you, she'll think you're generous. That's what you want, isn't it? To be the person people think is generous? I said yes. 20 minutes later, I logged into my travel portal, entered all the details, and watched $38,427.89 disappear from my savings account. The confirmation email pinged into my inbox. I forwarded it to Brooke. Got it, she chirped, checking her phone. Then she did this little dance, like a golden retriever who'd just been told she was going for a walk. Oh my God, you're the best, I owe you everything. Monday morning, first thing, I promise. She patted my shoulder and floated back to her desk, leaving the faint smell of her designer perfume behind. Some expensive French thing. I'd seen the bottle on her desk once. It cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I told myself it was fine. Monday was 3 days away, and she'd pay me back, that we'd laugh about it. I'd be the hero who saved her trip, and maybe next time there was a project going around, she'd mention my name to someone who mattered. That's how I thought the world worked back then. Monday came and went. I checked my phone at 9:15 a.m. when I got to my desk. Nothing .10:30 during my morning stand-up. Nothing. Noon, when I took my lunch break in the break room and watched Brooke across the office, laughing with the marketing team about something on her phone. I texted her. Hey, just a reminder about the flight payment. Let me know when you're able to transfer. Thanks. She replied 47 minutes later. Oh my God, Mel, I'm so sorry. Sales meeting ran long. I'm totally swamped. We'll get to it as soon as I can. Promise. Hugs and kisses. The hugs and kisses felt like a slap. Like she thought she could charm her way out of this with kisses and a smiley face. Tuesday, I didn't text her and I told myself I was giving her space, that I didn't want to be that person who hovers, that I told myself I was being generous. What I was actually doing was watching my stomach drop every time my phone buzzed, hoping it was a deposit notification and pretending it didn't hurt when it wasn't. I saw her at the coffee machine that afternoon. She was filling a mug, her nails freshly done, a bright coral color that matched her blouse. She was chatting with someone from HR about a new restaurant opening downtown. I walked up behind her and said her name. She turned, saw me, and her face did this thing I'd never seen before. It wasn't quite a flinch, but it was close. For half a second, she looked like she'd been caught stealing. Mel, she said, and her voice was all brightness again. Oh my God, how are you? I'm good, I said. Just wanted to follow up on the flight payment. It's Tuesday, and I haven't seen anything come through. Oh, right, the flight thing. She laughed, like it was a joke we were sharing. I know, I'm the worst that I literally got my bank statement yesterday, and it's just like a nightmare. Fees everywhere, and I'm going to switch banks, I swear, but I'm on it. Give me till Thursday. She was looking at me with those round eyes again, and part of me, the part that still wanted to believe that people were basically good, that no one would do something like this on purpose, wanted to believe her. But another part of me was already doing the math. Thursday, 2 more days. 2 more days of checking my phone and feeling sick. Okay, I said. Thursday. Thank you, Mel. You're a lifesaver. She squeezed my arm, the way you squeeze someone when you want them to know you care. Then she walked away, and I stood at the coffee machine, watching her retreating back, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Wednesday, I called her. She didn't answer. I texted her 4 times. She didn't respond to any of them. I walked past her desk 3 times that day. The first time, she was on the phone, laughing. The second time, she was typing something with her back to the aisle, and I could see her shoulders tense when she sensed me behind her. The third time, she was gone. I went to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall and stood there for 5 minutes, trying to breathe. $38,000. That wasn't play money. That was my emergency fund. That was the safety net I built over 3 years of saying no to dinners out and weekend trips, and the new laptop I'd been telling myself I'd buy someday. That was the money that was supposed to be there if I ever got sick, or my car died, or I decided to stop being a pushover and leave this stupid job and do something else with my life. And Brooke Adams had just taken it. Not even taken, tricked me into handing it over. She'd smiled and batted her eyelashes and called me Mel, like we were friends, and I'd handed her the keys to my safety net because I wanted her to like me. God, I was pathetic. By Thursday morning, I'd stopped hoping. The anger came in waves. First a hot flush that made my face burn, thinking about how easily she played me. Then cold, calculating clarity that settled behind my eyes and made everything look too sharp. I went through my messages one more time. Read every text. The one where I'd said yes. The one where I'd sent the confirmation. The 3 where I'd asked for my money back. The 2 where she'd made promises she never intended to keep. I'd given her 4 days. 4 days of polite follow-ups and benefit of the doubt, and maybe she's just busy. Rationalizations. 4 days of letting her pretend I didn't exist. She wasn't busy. She was waiting me out. She'd done this before, smaller amounts, with other people point $500 to Sarah in accounting, point $200 to David in design. Small debts that went uncollected because no one wanted to be the person who made a scene. She'd been building up to something bigger, and I'd walked right into her trap with a smile on my face. I picked up my phone and called the airline. The customer service representative had a calm, pleasant voice that made me want to scream. I told her I needed to cancel a reservation. She asked for the confirmation number. I read it off. All 8 tickets? She asked. All 8. Just so you know, there will be cancellation fees. About $300 per ticket. Are you sure you want to proceed? $300 per ticket. That was half what Brooke had been hoping to save by using my premium status. Half of what she'd been willing to steal from me. Yes, I said. I'm sure. The representative did something on her end, and I heard the soft click of a keyboard. I waited. Okay, the reservation has been canceled. Refunds will be processed to your credit card in 5 to 7 business days. Thank you. I hung up and sat there, staring at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. I looked the same as I had 5 minutes ago, same tired eyes, same messy ponytail, same slightly frumpy cardigan that I bought because it was on sale. But I was different. I'd just done something irreversible, and I knew, even before the phone started ringing, that there was no going back. Whatever came next, I'd started it. The phone rang. Brooke's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times, 4, 5. Then I picked up. What did you do? Her voice was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow. She was panicking. Good. Hello, Brooke, I said. How are you? Don't you, how are you me? You canceled the tickets. The tickets that I paid for, I said, with my own money. The same tickets you've been avoiding me about since Monday. I said I'd pay you back. When? You said Monday, then Tuesday, then Thursday. It's Thursday now. Where's my money? She sputtered. I could hear her trying to come up with an excuse, a lie, something that would make this my fault. You know I've been busy. You know I've got a lot going on. You can't just... I'm not going to let you steal $38,000 from me, Brooke. I wasn't stealing, she shrieked. I was going to pay you back. I just needed. You needed what? More time? Another week? A month? I've seen how you treat people who lend you money. I talked to Sarah and David. I know what you do. The silence on her end was long enough to confirm everything I'd suspected. I'm going to report you, I said, to HR, to anyone who'll listen. You're a thief, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. You can't prove anything. I've got your texts, every single one, and I've got the booking confirmation, and I've got you on voicemail telling me you definitely pay me back. You think that's nothing? You think people won't believe me? She was crying now. Maybe not real tears, but the sound was there, the ragged breath of someone who knows they've lost. I'll get you the money, she said. I'll get you the money. Just don't report me. You can't do that, my job. Your job is already in trouble, I said, but I'm not reporting you to HR. She went quiet. I'm giving you one more chance, I said. You pay me back by the end of the day, all of it, and you never talk to me again. You don't call me, you don't text me. You don't ask me to borrow anything ever again. You don't even look at me. Are we clear? Yes, she whispered. Yes, please. If I don't get my money by 5 o'clock, I'm going to HR and I'm going to tell them everything, not just about the tickets, about your loans from everyone else in this office, about your expense reports. About all of it. I've been here long enough to know where to look, and I promise you, if I have to look, I'll find things you don't want found. Okay, she sobbed. Okay. I'll get it. I swear. Just give me a few hours. You have until 5. She didn't pay me back. At 5 p.m., my phone was still empty. No deposit notification. No text. No nothing. I waited until 5:30. Then I packed up my things and went home. That night, I logged into the company network and started pulling files, expense reports, timesheets, audit logs from the project management system. Everything I'd ever seen Brooke do that looked even slightly off. I'd been at this company for 7 years, 7 years of keeping my head down and doing my job and not making waves. 7 years of being the reliable one, the one people went to when they needed something fixed or done right or cleaned up after someone else's mess. 7 years of being invisible. That was about to change. I knew Brooke would spread her version of the story first. She'd be at the office early, crying to anyone who'd listen about how I'd sabotaged her vacation, how I was jealous, how I was being unreasonable. She was good at that, getting people on her side. She'd probably have half the office convinced I was the villain by 9 a.m. But I didn't care. I'd done my homework. I knew what she'd say before she said it, and I'd already started writing the truth. It was a long email, professional, detailed, with attachments, dates, and timestamps and screenshots of every text message, every empty promise, every deleted voicemail. I wrote it the way I'd write a technical report, clear, dispassionate, impossible to argue with. I saved it to drafts. I'd send it in the morning, when everyone was at their desks and Brooke was sitting in her chair, pretending to work while she waited for me to start the confrontation she'd been bracing for all week. She wasn't waiting for me to report her. She was waiting for me to give up, to decide it wasn't worth the fight. To let her keep the money and slink away with my tail between my legs like everyone else she'd ever stolen from. That was her mistake. I wasn't everyone else. I was the person who'd spent 10 years building a reputation for being quiet, reliable, and completely unthreatening, that I was the person people looked right through. I was the person who made other people feel powerful. And I was done. The next morning, I walked into the office 10 minutes early. I'd slept for 2 hours, maybe 3. I couldn't remember. The coffee I'd made at home had gone cold in my thermos, and I didn't care. I opened my inbox and hovered my cursor over the send button. Then I did something I hadn't planned. I opened the company-wide chat and typed a message to the whole office. Good morning. Everyone that I know we don't usually use this channel for personal announcements, but I wanted to make sure everyone heard something from me directly. A few weeks ago, I helped a colleague book travel expenses. She promised to pay me back. It's now been a week, and she hasn't. I have all the receipts, texts, and voicemails documenting this. I'm not asking for suggestions. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm just asking that if anyone else has had a similar experience with this person, you consider speaking up. I'll be forwarding my complete documentation to HR by the end of the day. Thanks for listening. I hit send. The chat exploded. 5 minutes later, I was in the conference room with my director and 3 senior vice presidents. They pulled me in before I'd even had a chance to sit down at my desk. I could see through the glass walls that Brooke's office was emptied. She'd come in, seen the message, and left. Probably crying in the bathroom, probably already texting her friends, trying to figure out who'd turned on her. I sat in one of the chairs that was slightly too low for the table, so I had to lean forward to be comfortable. It made me look intense. That was fine. I was intense. Melanie, my director, Carol, began, I've seen your message, and the documentation you've been sending around. Can we talk about what's happening? I'm happy to, I said. I'm being defrauded by a colleague I trusted, and I want to make sure that doesn't happen to anyone else. We don't have a formal policy about personal loans between employees, one of the VPs said. She was wearing a jacket that probably cost more than my rent. This is an interpersonal issue, not a company issue. Actually, I said, pulling up my evidence folder. It's both, because here's what Brooke's been doing on company time. Here are the timesheets where she recorded 8 hours of work while she was actually at a spa. Here are the expense reports where she billed client dinners that were actually personal meals. Here are the client complaints she buried, because they might affect her commission. The VP went very still. How long have you been keeping this? Since I started noticing discrepancies in the accounting, I said. A few years. I didn't have the full picture until recently, but it's all there. Every single transaction. Carol looked at me like she'd never seen me before, like I just walked into the room wearing a completely different face. Melanie, she said slowly, you're saying Brooke's been stealing from the company? I'm saying Brooke's been inflating expenses and falsifying records, I said. The personal stuff is separate. The $38,000 she owes me is a civil matter. But the company stuff, that's yours. I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. I felt tired, hollowed out, like I'd just spent the last 10 years of goodwill and trust in a single act of self-defense, and I wasn't sure if I'd won or just lost everything else. But Carol was already on the phone with legal. The VPs were exchanging looks. The whole building seemed to be vibrating with the news that something had finally happened, that someone had finally done something about the girl everyone hated, but no one had ever confronted. I sat in the conference room, watching the chaos unfold through the glass walls, and I felt the strangest thing. Relief. Not happiness. Not pride. Just relief. Because for the first time in my life, I'd refused to be the one who took it. For the first time, I pushed back. And whatever happened next, I knew I'd survive. Brooke never came back to the office. She emailed HR later that afternoon, resigning, with a check in the mail for the exact amount I was owed. Her desk was cleaned out by the end of the week, and O1 threw a party. No one said they'd miss her. The rumor mill churned for a while. People whispered about what I'd done. Some people thought I was harsh. Some people thought I was brave. Most people just didn't want to be on my bad side. I didn't care what anyone thought. I had my money back. I had my safety net restored. And I had something else I hadn't had before. I had a reputation for being the person who didn't back down. That was worth more than $38,000. That was worth everything. But the thing about making a stand is that it changes you, and the people around you can't always handle the new version of you that emerges. That I started noticing small shifts in how people treated me. There was a wariness. Now, to distanced, I'd gone from being the person you asked for favors to the person you didn't want to cross. I didn't mind the shift. Not really. IT felt like I'd finally taken off a heavy coat I'd been wearing for years, and I could breathe now. But I also knew that the version of me who'd been quiet and accommodating had served a purpose. She'd made other people comfortable. She'd made them feel safe. This new version of me, she was a little harder, a little sharper. She didn't have time for people who needed her to be small so they could feel big. I started the conversation later that week, walking out of the office with Carol after a late meeting. The parking lot was nearly empty, and the streetlights cast a yellow glow over everything. You've been here a long time, she said. 7 years. You could have spoken up sooner. I looked at her. The lighting made her look older, more tired. She was a good manager, Carol, but she wasn't someone who liked surprises. I wasn't ready, I said. I didn't have the proof. I didn't have the nerve. And now, I thought about it. I thought about the long, slow years I'd spent trying to be the person everyone liked. The years I'd spent telling myself it didn't matter that I was invisible, because at least I was safe. Now, I said, I don't think I'll ever keep quiet again. She nodded. Something in her expression shifted, like she was reassessing me. Good, she said. We could use more people like that around here. She got into her car and drove away. I stood there in the empty parking lot, watching her taillights disappear into the dark, and I smiled. I'd spent so long being invisible. It was time to be seen. Monday morning arrived with the kind of gray light that makes you wonder if you've woken up at all or if you're still dreaming. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 5 minutes, watching people file into the building. Normal people having normal days, not wondering if everyone in the office was going to hate them. Brooke had resigned on Friday, but I knew that didn't mean the story was over. She'd had a full week to poison the well. I had seen the texts she sent to mutual colleagues, screenshots that made their way back to me through the grapevine. Melanie's unstable. She's been holding a grudge for months. She's clearly struggling with something personal and taking it out on me. The classics. Always blame the victim's mental health. It's the oldest playbook in the world. I walked into the office at 8:45, and the silence was immediate. Not the comfortable silence of a morning office, but the brittle, held-breath silence of people who are waiting to see which way the wind will blow. I caught a few glances, some quickly averted. A woman from accounting who'd always been friendly gave me a tight, performative smile before turning back to her screen. I'd been at this company for 7 years, and I knew how this worked. People were scared. They'd heard Brooke's version, and now they were seeing me walk in with my head high, and they weren't sure what to do with that. It's easier to believe the person who plays the victim, especially when the person who's been wronged doesn't have the energy to perform their own suffering. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and started working. There were 47 emails waiting for me, most of them from the weekend. Most of them not urgent. I answered the urgent ones. I ignored the ones that were obviously fishing for gossip. At 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I opened it and read, "You think you're so clever. We'll see how long you last when everyone knows what you really did." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I screenshotted the message, saved it to my evidence folder, and blocked the number. I didn't know who it was. One of Brooke's friends? Probably. One of the 7 people whose trip I'd canceled. The trip they'd been planning to take on stolen money. I kept working. At 11:30, a man I didn't recognize stopped by my cubicle. He was tall, with a sharp jawline and dark hair that curled slightly at the edges. He was wearing a suit that looked expensive, but not flashy. Something about the way he stood said lawyer or executive. "Melanie Foster?" he asked. I nodded. "Travis Bennett," he said, extending his hand. "I'm from the legal department. I've been asked to review the documentation you provided to Carol last week. Do you have a moment?" I shook his hand. His grip was firm, but not aggressive. I'd learned to notice that kind of thing. People who squeezed too hard were always hiding something. "Of course," I said, standing up. "My office." He nodded, and I led him to the small conference room I'd booked for the afternoon. It was glass-walled, like everything else in this building, but it was the only space I had. He sat down across from me, crossing one ankle over his knee. "I've gone through the expense reports," he said. "The timesheets, the email trails, it's all very thorough. I have to say, you've done a remarkable amount of work on this." "I've been noticing discrepancies for years," I said. "I just never had a reason to compile everything." He studied me for a moment. "You seem calm for someone who just took down a colleague." "I didn't take her down," I said. "She took herself down. I just provided the evidence." Travis smiled. It was a small smile, but it reached his eyes. "I like that framing. We'll use that in the report." "What report?" "The formal investigation," he said. "HR has decided to look into all of Brooke's activities over the past 3 years, not just the personal loans. The expense fraud alone is significant enough to warrant it, but we're also looking at something else." He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were copies of emails I'd never seen before, correspondence between Brooke and a vendor we'd worked with on a major project last year. The vendor was a small tech firm that had been paid double the market rate for a simple software integration. She was getting kickbacks, I said, reading through the emails. She'd approve inflated invoices, and they'd pay her a percentage. "Exactly," Travis said. "That's embezzlement. Felony-level embezzlement." I sat back in my chair. I'd known Brooke was a liar. I'd known she was a thief. But this was another level. This was the kind of thing that could get you prison time. "She wasn't just borrowing money from colleagues," I said slowly. "She was stealing from the company. For years." "At least 2 years," Travis confirmed. "Probably longer. We're still tracing the patterns. But here's the thing, Melanie, you're the one who made this possible. Without your initial complaint, we'd never have looked into her financials. She'd still be here, still taking money, still charming everyone into looking the other way." I didn't know what to say. I'd been so focused on getting my own money back that I hadn't thought about the broader implications. "HR is going to issue a statement," Travis continued. "They want to thank you publicly. They also want to offer you a position in a new task force we're creating, an internal ethics review committee. You'd be advising on policy changes, helping us spot fraud before it happens." "You're offering me a promotion?" "I'm offering you a chance to keep doing what you're clearly good at," he said. "Not everyone has the patience to collect evidence like you did. Not everyone has the nerve to use it. We need more people like you." I stared at him. 7 years I'd been invisible. 7 years of doing my job and keeping my head down. And now this stranger was telling me I was exactly what the company needed. "I'll think about it," I said. "I'm not making any decisions until this is over." "Fair enough." He stood up, tucking the folder under his arm. "Take your time. The offer stands." That afternoon, I decided to take a walk. I needed air. I needed to think. I needed to figure out who I was now that I'd become the person I'd always been too scared to be. I walked past the break room and heard my name. 2 women were talking, their voices low enough that they thought they were private. "Heard she's been collecting information on everyone for years." That can't be true. I don't know. Did you see how detailed that chat message was? It was like she'd been waiting for a chance to destroy someone. I stopped walking. I stood just outside the door, my heart hammering in my chest. This was what Brooke had done. She'd taken my act of self-defense and turned it into proof that I was a threat. She'd made people afraid of me. I could have walked in. I could have confronted them. I could have explained that I wasn't some spy, that I'd only ever collected information on one person, and only because she'd stolen from me. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I didn't owe them an explanation, that I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I'd done what I had to do to protect myself, and if people wanted to believe I was dangerous, let them. Being dangerous wasn't the worst thing I could be. I turned and walked away. When I got back to my desk, I found a note taped to my monitor, handwritten, pink papered. IT said, "You're a hero, but don't let them tell you otherwise. Someone who's been waiting years for someone to do what you did." I looked around the office. No one was looking at me. No one was watching to see my reaction. But someone had left this note. Someone had seen what I'd done and felt grateful. I folded it carefully and put it in my bag. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The way Brooke had smiled when I said yes. The way she'd ignored my texts. The way her voice had cracked when she realized I'd canceled the tickets. The way she'd resigned without ever admitting she was wrong. But I kept coming back to the same thought. What if I hadn't said anything? What if I'd just swallowed the loss, convinced myself it wasn't worth the drama, let her get away with it? I would have spent the next 10 years replaying that moment, that I would have hated myself for being weak, that I would have let her win, and she would have kept winning because that's what people like her do. They find the people who won't fight back, and they take everything they can. I wasn't that person anymore. I got out of bed, went to my laptop, and opened the company's internal forum. IT was a place where people posted about everything from lost keys to complaints about the coffee machine. It was also a place where, if you were careful, you could make a statement that everyone would see. I started typing. The post went up at 2 a.m. By 8 a.m., it had 400 views and 70 comments. I'd written it carefully, and no names, just the facts, the story of a person who'd been asked to help, who'd trusted, who'd been ignored, who'd fought back. I'd included the texts, the timestamps, the cancellation confirmation. I'd phrased it as a cautionary tale, a reminder that sometimes the people who smile the widest are the ones who want to take the most. I didn't say it was about Brooke. I didn't need to. Everyone already knew. The comments were brutal. Some people called me a liar. Some people called me a hero. Most people just said they were glad someone had finally called her out. But there was one comment that made me pause. It was from a user I didn't recognize with a profile picture that was just a generic silhouette. Check the vendor contracts for the past 3 years. You'll find more than just kickbacks. She was running a side business using company resources. I have evidence. I'll share it with you privately. I stared at the screen. Another layer. Another piece of the puzzle I'd been too afraid to investigate. I sent a private message to the anonymous user. Tell me what you know. They replied within minutes. Attached were dozens of files. Invoices, project plans, email trails. It turned out Brooke had been using the company's network to run a freelance consulting business on the side. She'd been billing clients through a shell company, using our resources, stealing time that was supposed to be for us. It wasn't just fraud. It was embezzlement, theft, and breach of contract, all rolled into one. I saved everything. Then I forwarded it to Travis. He called me within the hour. Where did you get this? Someone sent it to me, I said. But it's real. I checked the timestamps and the IP addresses. It's all from inside the company network. Jesus. His voice was tight. This is going to blow this thing wide open. How did you find this person? I didn't. They found me. I paused. That's the thing about being a threat, Travis. You become a magnet for everyone else who's been hurt. They come to you because they know you'll actually do something. He was quiet for a moment. I need to bring this to the board. This isn't just HR anymore. This is a legal matter. Do what you have to do. You're okay with that? Being in the center of a criminal investigation. I've been in the center of it since I sent that first text. I said, I'm not afraid of the truth. You should be afraid of the people who don't want it told. Let them come, I said, and I meant it. I didn't get the formal promotion until the dust had settled. IT took 3 months for the investigation to run its course. Brooke's side business was exposed. The vendor kickbacks were proven. She was hit with a civil suit from the company and a criminal referral that she'll be dealing with for years. In the end, the task force Travis had mentioned became a permanent department. They made me the head of it. My office moved from the cubicle farm to the 4th floor with a window that faced the river. I kept the note from the anonymous colleague. It's still taped to my new monitor, a reminder that even when the world feels like it's against you, someone out there is paying attention. Travis and I worked together on the case, and somewhere along the way, we stopped being just colleagues. He showed up at my desk one Friday afternoon with 2 cups of coffee and said, I'm not sure if this is appropriate, but I'd like to take you to dinner. I said yes. He took me to a small Italian place with red checkered tablecloths and candles that flickered in the dark. We talked about the case, then about our lives, then about the things we wanted to do when we weren't working. I told him about the years I'd spent being invisible. He told me about the years he'd spent being the lawyer who cleaned up other people's messes without anyone noticing. I think we were both trying to hide, he said. Maybe, I said, but not anymore. He smiled. Not anymore. 6 months later, I was running the ethics department, dating a man I actually respected, and building a reputation as the person you didn't want to cross. IT wasn't the life I'd imagined for myself. It was better. Brooke faded from memory. The 7 friends stopped threatening me when they realized I had receipts for everything. My coworkers stopped whispering and started treating me with a kind of grudging respect. I still have the old apartment in Brooklyn, the one I bought with my savings before all of this happened. I like to sit on the fire escape sometimes and look at the city and think about how much can change in a year. I don't regret any of it. Not the $38,000, not the sleepless nights, not the feeling of being hated. Because that feeling taught me something I'd never understood before. Being hated is better than being invisible. The office on the 4th floor had a view of the river, which I'd always assumed was a metaphor for something. Moving water, constant change, the impossibility of stepping in the same current twice. I'd been in my new position for 3 weeks, and I still found myself staring out the window during meetings, watching the barges drift slowly past, wondering if I was moving with the current or against it. Travis had been right about one thing. Being the head of a new ethics department made me a target. Not in a dramatic way, not with threats scrawled on my door, but in the small, bureaucratic ways that were more insidious. Budget requests that got lost. Meeting invitations that never arrived. Memos from other departments that seemed to have been written in a language I didn't speak, full of acronyms and references I'd have to chase down. I'd expected resistance. I hadn't expected it to be so quiet. What you're doing, Travis said one evening, leaning against my office doorframe, is making people uncomfortable, people who've been comfortable for a long time. They're not going to thank you for it. Did I ask for thanks? He smiled. No, but you might have asked for enemies. I turned from the window. I already had enemies. Now, they just have titles. He walked in and sat down across from me. The late afternoon light caught his face, and for a moment, I saw the lines I had noticed before. He was tired too. We were both tired. I've been going through the vendor files, he said. The ones from the extended investigation. There's something you need to see. He slid a folder across my desk. Inside were printed emails, redacted in places, with a handwritten note stuck to the top. Look at the dates. Look at the amounts. I read through them. They were invoices from a company called Apex Logistics, dated over the past 2 years. The amounts were modest. A few $1,000s here, a few thousand there. But the pattern was consistent. Every month, like clockwork, Apex billed us for consulting services that had no corresponding project records. Brooke signed off on these, I said. She did. But look at who approved them above her. I scanned the approvals. Names I recognized. Senior managers, directors, people who'd been at the company for years. Are you telling me this was organized? I'm telling you there's a system, Travis said. Brooke was part of it, but she wasn't the only part. These invoices were being approved by people who knew exactly what they were doing. I felt the familiar cold settle in my chest. The same feeling I'd had the day I realized Brooke wasn't going to pay me back. The feeling of being at the edge of something vast and ugly. How many people? At least 6 that I've identified so far. Could be more. The next morning, I started my own investigation. Quietly, off the books. I didn't want to raise any flags until I knew exactly what I was dealing with. I began with the Apex Logistics file that I ran the company through every database I had access to, public records, business registries, ownership trails. The shell game was obvious to anyone who knew how to look. Apex was owned by a holding company, which was owned by another holding company, which traced back to a law firm that also represented one of our senior VPs. It wasn't just a scam. It was a well-oiled machine, and Brooke had been a very small cog. I spent the next 3 nights in my apartment, cross-referencing names and dates on my laptop. I barely slept, I barely ate. I was possessed by the same obsessive energy I'd felt when I was tracking down Brooke's expense reports, the need to know, to understand, to find the pattern. By Friday, I had a list of 0.7 people. All of them had signed off on Apex invoices at some point. All of them had ties to the same law firm. All of them had been at the company long enough to know exactly what they were doing. I didn't know what to do with the information, but I couldn't go to Travis. Not yet. He'd already helped me once, and I didn't want to drag him into something that might put his own position at risk. I didn't trust anyone else. So I did what I always did when I didn't know where to turn. I sat on my fire escape looking out at the city, and I thought. The city didn't give me answers, but it gave me perspective. The buildings stood in the same places they'd stood for 100 years, indifferent to my crisis. The river kept moving. The sky kept changing color, and somewhere out there, in one of those million lights, someone else was sitting on their own fire escape, trying to figure out how to fix something they didn't break. I wasn't alone. I just had to find the people who'd help me. I reached out to the anonymous source who'd sent me the first batch of files, the one who'd posted on the forum. I didn't know who they were, but I knew they were still in the company. I sent a message through the same channel, carefully worded, asking if they knew anything about Apex Logistics. The reply came within hours. I've been waiting for you to find that. Look at the invoices from Q3 of last year. There's a line item that doesn't match the pattern. It's a red flag. I pulled the Q3 invoices. There, buried in the middle of the file, was a single invoice for $47,000, addressed to a different vendor entirely. The vendor didn't exist. I ran the name through 5 databases and got nothing. This was bigger than I thought. This wasn't just a group of managers skimming a few $1,000s. Someone had been moving serious money out of the company for years. I sent another message to my source. Who? Their reply was chilling. You know who. I stared at the screen that I knew who, the senior VP whose law firm owned Apex. The senior VP who'd been at the company for 15 years, who'd built half the departments, who'd been a mentor to dozens of people, the senior VP whose name was on the plaque in the lobby. Marcus Webb. I didn't sleep that night and I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it. Marcus Webb was a legend. He joined the company when it was barely a startup and turned it into the mid-sized player it was today. He'd been quoted in industry journals. He'd given keynote speeches at conferences. He had a reputation for integrity. And he was stealing from his own company. Or maybe he wasn't. Maybe the invoices were legitimate. Maybe there was an explanation. But I'd been burned before by someone who'd seemed trustworthy, and I'd learned my lesson. Trust wasn't given. It was earned. And right now, Marcus Webb hadn't earned anything. The next morning, I went to work with a plan. I'd request a meeting with Webb himself. I'd ask him to explain the invoices. I'd watch his reaction, and I'd know. I sent the meeting request at 9 a.m. By 9:30, I had an acceptance. He'd see me at 2 p.m. in his office. I spent the morning preparing that I printed out every invoice, every email, every record I had that I organized them chronologically, that I highlighted the suspicious entries. I prepared questions that would force him to either explain or lie. Travis found me in the break room at noon, making a cup of tea I wasn't going to drink. You look like hell, he said. Thanks. What's going on? You've been locked in your office for 3 days. I considered telling him. I trusted him with everything else. But this was different. This was his boss's boss. This was someone he'd probably admired for years. I'm working on something, I said. I'll tell you when I'm ready. He studied my face. Melanie, whatever it is, you don't have to do it alone. Maybe not, I said. But for now, I'm doing it alone. Marcus Webb's office was on the 7th floor, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the entire city. The furniture was dark wood and leather. The art on the walls was original, not prints. He sat behind his desk like a king on a throne, and when I walked in, he rose to greet me with a smile that could have lit up a room. Melanie, he said, extending his hand. I've heard wonderful things about you. Please sit. I shook his hand. It was warm and dry. No sign of nerves. That was the first red flag. An innocent person would have been at least slightly uneasy. He was perfectly at ease. I sat down and opened my folder. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, I said. I'm conducting a routine audit of past vendor contracts, and I came across a few invoices from Apex Logistics that I wanted to ask you about. His expression didn't change. That was the second red flag. He didn't blink. He didn't frown. He just nodded, as if I'd asked about the weather. Apex Logistics, he repeated. Yes, I'm familiar with them. We used them for a few projects a couple of years ago. What's the concern? The concern is that several of these invoices don't correspond to any project records I can find, and the amounts seem unusually high for consulting services. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his hands over his stomach. Melanie, let me be frank with you. When you're running a company the size of ours, you sometimes have to make decisions that aren't in the manual. You have to trust people. You have to take calculated risks. Sometimes those risks don't pay off, but that doesn't mean there's anything criminal going on. With all due respect, sir, I said, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just asking for an explanation. The patterns I'm seeing are unusual. He smiled again. It was the smile of someone who'd been doing this for a long time and knew exactly how to handle people like me. Then let me give you an explanation, he said. Those invoices were for consulting work that was done off-site but off the books, so to speak. We were testing a new initiative that we didn't want to make public. The work was valuable. The contractors were worth every penny. And the people who approved those invoices knew exactly what they were approving. And Brooke Adams? Brooke Adams was a junior employee who was given responsibilities beyond her level. She made mistakes. She did things that weren't appropriate. She's been dealt with. You're not going to find a conspiracy here. The word conspiracy hung in the air between us. I hadn't used it. He had. That was the third red flag. I see, I said. Then I won't waste any more of your time. I stood up and gathered my folder. He rose too, walking me to the door. Melanie, he said, his voice lowering, I want you to know that I appreciate your diligence. It's exactly the kind of thing we need more of in this organization. But I also want you to be careful. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed again, and not everything you find is worth finding. I met his eyes. I'll keep that in mind. I left his office with my heart pounding and my hands shaking. I'd been threatened. Not overtly, not with words that could be quoted, but with a weight and a look that told me exactly what kind of game I was playing. Marcus Webb wasn't just a thief. He was a predator, and he knew I'd seen him. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the files on my laptop, trying to figure out my next move that I could go to the board. But I had no proof that Marcus was personally involved, only the link through the law firm. I could go to the police, but without a clear chain of evidence, they'd laugh me out of the building. I could do nothing. I could let it go. I could pretend I'd never seen the invoices and focus on my new job and my new relationship and my new life. But I'd already seen, and I'd already decided not to be invisible anymore. I opened the anonymous messaging channel and typed, I know about Marcus. I need more evidence. What do you have? The reply came back within minutes. Meet me tomorrow, 6 a.m., the coffee shop on 14th and Vine. I'll tell you everything. I stared at the screen. My source, whoever they were, wanted to meet in person. That meant they had something so sensitive they couldn't trust digital communication. That meant they were scared. So was I. But I typed back, I'll be there. The coffee shop was small and dark, the kind of place that looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 1980s. I arrived at 5:45, ordered a black coffee I didn't plan to drink, and sat in the corner booth where I could see both entrances. At 6 o'clock sharp, a woman walked in. She was in her late 40s, with gray-streaked hair and a face that had seen too many sleepless nights. She was wearing a coat that was too thin for the weather and carrying a messenger bag that looked heavier than it should be.